Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Hey guys, every Wednesday, I'm going to be hosting a live online event sharing my biggest lessons in an action-packed presentation designed to help you go from where you are now to where you want to be. I'm helping men break through their biggest limiting beliefs to create the life they want. Plus, after the presentation, I'm going to do an open Q&A where I answer all of your questions. To register for my next event, go to kfmlive.com. Again, that's kfmlive.com. Register now before the event fills up. Hope to see you there. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Dr. Mark Goulston. He's a nationally acclaimed psychiatrist, crisis counselor, and business consultant, former FBI hostage negotiator, and the author of Just Listen, Get Out of Your Own Way, and other popular books. He contributes to the Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, Business Insider, Huffington Post, and Psychology Today. All right, Mark, and what he's been doing lately is working on this topic and researching this topic of how do you lead through fear. So, Dr. Mark Goulston, happy to have you here on the show.
Glad to be on the show.
And I'm always curious, we'll dive into how you got started with what you do, but we kickstart off every show, Mark, with a favorite success quote or even just a saying from how about some of the books that you've written and what that means to you.
Well, one of my favorite quotes comes from my last mentor. I've had 6 mentors have all passed away, and my last mentor was a guy named Warren Bennis, who some people will say invented the field of leadership. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, "Be a first-class noticer." And what he meant by that is when you look or watch or see something, you're an observer, you're passive. But when you notice something, you're connected to it. So I'm noticing my printer here still has packing tape on it, and yet it's 5 years old. Looks like I must have been in a rush. And here's an example because I've been speaking around the country on a topic called hacking Steve Jobs, because I'm also a people hacker, meaning I hack into people's personalities. And when I used to do FBI and police hostage negotiation training, I would teach them how to hack into the person's personality and disarm someone from the inside out.
You got quite the interesting background here. And so when you're talking about hacking Steve Jobs, I used to work for Apple. I've read his books, seen the movies. I really respect the guy. I actually got a poster of one of his quotes from the Stanford commencement speech on my wall right in front of me here. What did you find through hacking Steve Jobs?
Well, what I discovered, and this goes back to being a first-class noticer, is that Steve Jobs noticed that so these are the steps for anyone listening. He noticed that technology wasn't going to go away and was going to become more personalized. So it wasn't going to be in big companies. It was going to be something that everybody would someday use on their own. So he noticed that. He also noticed that technology or computers were unreliable, complicated, and ugly. And so I believe what he said to himself is make it pretty, make it reliable, and make it simple, and we will own the world. So he noticed into something that wasn't going away. And part of my background as a hostage negotiator is now, sadly, coming back into being in demand. And something that I've noticed is terrorism is not going to go away. The only way terrorism would go away is for all the countries of the world, the powerful ones, make it priority number one. Russia, China, America, make getting rid of terrorism priority number one. Anything short of that, and terrorism is not going away. And I actually wrote something about this. And what I've also noticed is that psychopathic, evil, and charming people are not going away either. And so I see the heads of terrorism as that, psychopathic, evil, and charismatic. I don't see the people that they seduce into doing evil acts as evil. I see them being able to charm them and seduce them. And so given that psychopathic, evil, and charming people aren't going to go away, if I was noticing that, what I would then say is, okay, in the process of their using their charisma and charm, what they're able to do is they're able to recruit, enroll, and radicalize people. And so part of my focus is how do you identify people at those states of vulnerability where they're recruitable, enrollable, and radicalizable? And how do you put something at each of those places so they don't move forward? So does that make sense? So I'm just giving you a sample of how you notice something that you might be able to build a business around, build a purpose around, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Andrew?
Very in-depth. Yes, it does. This isn't a political show, but it's a good topic that you brought up about terrorism. And, obviously it's very relevant. It has been for many decades. But really, I mean, you said if all the countries got involved, do you think it could really go away? Is it something that can go away? Is it not just a part of society?
Well, look, there's always something else that's not going to go away, but this doesn't necessarily mean being radical, but this can make you kind of a rampage shooter. Feeling an injustice is done to you, creating anger and a desire to retaliate is not going to go away. I mean, every day people feel that something unfair has happened to them, and it triggers a desire to retaliate. What has changed now is people have felt that desire and not acted on it, partially because it rose and fall and dissipated, and then they went back to their life. And this is before your time, Andrew, but when I was growing up, maybe not, every high school and junior high had odd, quirky people that were often made fun of, but they kind of lived to themselves. I mean, they probably had angry thoughts, but they really didn't act on them because they didn't have the means and they didn't have the support. They weren't goaded as they are by the internet. The internet, with a number of these rampage shooters, school shooters, have been goaded. Go on, do it. Go on, do it. Yeah, get even. That'll be cool. So that's where we have to intervene. But feeling an injustice has been done to you and a desire to retaliate, add humiliation to it, and that's a recipe for anyone seeking revenge.
Okay, let's go into the book, your latest book here, Talking Crazy, Talking Too Crazy. This is the subtitle of the book, guys. How to deal with the irrational and impossible people in your life.
Well, I wrote Just Listen, and that was about how do you listen into people to get them to open up. So here's the difference between listening to you, Andrew, and listening into you. So far, I've been listening to you, responding to questions and trying to keep my tangents to a minimum. You can kick me to the curb anytime you want.
Got it.
And I'm going to hold you to that because I'll get off on a tangent and you won't pull me back before I'm out of the solar system. But here's an example of this is for Just Listen of listening into someone. So I'm going to demonstrate listening into you. Now you haven't said this, but what's really important to you, I believe, is that this show and what you're doing is a calling. It may be a good business idea, but it's a calling. There's something about it that compels you to provide service to the people who listen in. And I'm guessing you're very careful to try to bring on experts that can give your listeners or people who read, transcripts or the information that you're providing. It's very important that you serve your listeners and readers And my guess is you're also on the lookout for people who, really don't do anything good. In fact, I don't know if it's happened. I'll ask you, have you ever interviewed sort of an expert? And since you do the interviews ahead of time, afterwards, have you said to yourself, I can't put it up?
Yeah,
it's crappy. I'll have to apologize to the person or maybe offer them a second thing, but there was no value in it.
Yeah, you're right about the calling and not really doing this for business opportunity. I mean, I did this for over a year for free, full time, and just wanted to make something that would make an impact on other people's lives. And absolutely, I'm super cautious about the type of people that come on the show, because if I'm, going to air it, then that's basically saying that I support it. And if I don't support it, then I don't want to air it.
Right, and so it's also a measure of your credibility, because your listeners are looking for you to vet value for them.
Right.
And if you let non-value slip in, it's going to affect their credibility, your credibility, their respect for you, and probably your respect for yourself. You say, gee, why did I air that thing? Okay, the guy's a big muck-a-muck or the woman's a big muck-a-muck, but they said nothing helpful.
Right, yeah. Or they were trying to sell.
Right.
Going back to what you said, right now I'm listening to you, you're responding to my questions, but you're also listening into me. And so how can we dive deeper into this topic, and how could someone apply this into their relationships and their relationships mostly? Okay,
so listening into someone helps them to open up, and I'll transition to talking to crazy, and then I'll give you an example that's going to be the killer example. So how's that to set myself up for failure here? Most of the attention I got for Just Listen were 2 chapters. One chapter was steering clear of toxic people. So, dealing with the most difficult or avoiding them. So that got a lot of interest. And then there was another chapter, how to move yourself from OF to OK. And it was a way to sort of talk yourself down from really being agitated and wanting to smash someone verbally or whatever, to calm yourself down. And so those 2 chapters got more interest than the rest of the book. And I said, why don't I write a whole book on that topic? And so Talking to Crazy, how to deal with the irrational and impossible people in your life, came from wanting to focus in on that. And what I learned about Talking to Crazy that's different from talking Just Listen. Just Listen's about listening into people. Talking to Crazy's, the key component there is leaning into their irrationality. And that doesn't mean agreeing with it. Here's the relationship keeper advice. So if anyone's listening, and since I imagine there's a bunch of guys listening, if I were to ask any of you, do you ever have trouble talking to someone who doesn't want your advice or solutions, and actually when you give them, it makes it worse? I think people are listening to this. They just pulled over their car because they don't want to miss a word I'm about to say.
Yeah, no, I know this is a good topic, especially guys listening to this podcast. So continue.
Yeah. So here's an example of listening into someone. So let's assume it's a spouse. I don't want to be sexist here, and they're actually women, because I coach women who have the problem with that irrational husband or boyfriend. But for the purpose of this podcast, and it's for men, about men. So assuming that you have a spouse, a girlfriend, or even, an irrational, emotional male friend. So imagine your mind's eye, we'll say a woman, is venting at you. Now, the knee-jerk reaction when they're venting at you is to say, now calm down, get a hold of yourself, or if you get triggered, to say, you're speaking irrationally, you're too emotional. I'm not going to respond to that. Well, one of the worst things you can do, but all of us men tend to do, we tend to be problem solvers, is you don't hear them, you solve them as if they're a problem. So here's the deal. When an emotional person is venting at you verbally, what they really want is they want you to be able to move them from DEFCON 1 to DEFCON 4, because if they're not able to get stuff up and out and off their chest, they're going to do something really stupid. So they're venting so that they don't do something even worse. And sometimes they'll vent about someone else, which is not that easy to hear, but you can hear it. But when they're venting at you specifically, they want to make sure there's no wiggle room. They want you right in the crosshairs of their venting. But if you can realize that they are doing this because they really want to get something off their chest so they can calm down, what you do is, knowing they tend to do that, knowing it's going to be a conversation heading in that direction, hold a little bit of yourself back. Don't be aloof, but say, I have a gut feeling that the conversation is going to escalate and they're going to start to vent. Then when they start to vent, look them straight in the eye, but look them in the eye, not in an intimidating or in a condescending way, but look them in the eye saying to yourself, here it goes, and I got to find out what's going on underneath this, as opposed to being a deer in the headlights of a car, which just makes them escalate. So they vent, and then what you do is after they vent, and let's say they say something, you're a workaholic. You're always on your iPad. I can't get your attention. You're a crappy boyfriend. All of things which some of our listeners today have heard. So they say that, and you're immediately on the defensive. But if you apply the formula that I'm saying, is they're venting to get something off their chest. When they do that, lean into them with that look. You might, if you're with them, you may even lean in a little bit with your body posture, but keep looking at them straight in the eye, saying, "Okay, I got to get to what's going on underneath this, especially since I don't want to repeat this conversation too often." And so when they vent, what you do is you're looking at them and you pause for 2 to 4 seconds. The reason for that is it's going to show them that you took in what they said. It's going to actually make them nervous because they're expecting you to react. They're expecting it to then escalate. And then when it escalates, they can get even more off their chest venting, except it's a terrible conversation. And so you pause for 2 to 4 seconds. And if they say, you're a lousy boyfriend, or you're a terrible listener, you pause for the 2 to 4 seconds. And they may even say, what? Because they may be a little bit off balance. And you look at them, you could say, say more about me being a terrible listener, or say more about me being a lousy boyfriend, because that sounds really messed up. And they go, what? No, say more about this. You got my undivided attention. So what you're really trying to do is you're a syringe drawing all the abscess out of all this vitriol. And what you'll see is they'll get a little discombobulated. Because they're not used to you saying, hit me with more, because it's counterintuitive. And they'll say, well, sometimes I try to get your attention and your attention is on something else. And it's really frustrated. And the say more about frustrating or say more about lousy boyfriend, those are conversation deepeners. They're in my book, Just Listen and Talking to Crazy. It's how you get under what the person's saying. And so if they say it's really frustrating and when I try to get your attention, another conversation deepener you say to them is, really? That sounds messed up too, but really? And they'll vent even more. And so if you're a first-class noticer, you'll actually see that their venting starts to shift over because you've disarmed them. And then what you say to them is, give me an example, and don't pull any punches, of when I've been my worst as a listener, or when I've been the lousiest as a boyfriend. And they're going to say, what? No. You got my undivided attention. I'm not giving you any solutions. Tell me about an example like that. And why this is important is when they share the example, they re-experience the feelings, but instead of being blown off by you now, you're actually listening in, and they'll share some awful event, awful in their mind. And then when they finish that, you pause, and you don't get defensive, and you say, that was horrendous that I did that. On a scale of 1 to 10, let's see what we're dealing with. When that happened, And 10 was you thinking to yourself, the worst mistake I ever made was getting involved with this jerk, and now I'm trapped. And 1 is, we're doing pretty well. When that happened, what are we dealing with? Was that a 10? And in your minds, can you track as I'm going with this, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm tracking it. Yeah.
And what'll happen is they will be so disarmed, they'll break eye contact, they'll look down, and they'll say, it was a 7 or an 8. And the reason they'll say 7 or 8 is because you've so disarmed them that they no longer feel the 10 anymore because you listen to them.
Yeah.
And then let me finish the thing, and then
okay.
people can review it. Okay, and then we can go to something else. And then you say to them, and by the way, if you actually care about this person, you're actually going to take some responsibility and feel some remorse. Like, boy, I really can be just oblivious. I really can just be a workaholic. God, this was a girl I adored, and look what I've done to her. So, let it touch you. Don't just be transactional. And then what you say to her, you can say, look at me. I want you to talk to me like I'm 5 years old. Going forward, what are some observable things that I need to always do? And what are some things that I need to stop doing completely so I never put you back in that position of really regretting that you're with me? And what will happen is you will be in charge of this conversation, and you will so diffuse it because you've leaned into it. And here's the icing on the cake. And if you have sort of a soft spot, if there's something besides just being entrepreneurial and an alpha male, if there's something inside you that's capable of tenderness, what you say to her after this is you say, look at me again. And by this time, her eyes are going to be tearing up, and you look at her deeply in her eyes again. You could say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, and I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to check in every month with you about how I'm doing, because I don't want to BS you about this. You're going to get lucky that night.
Really good. This is good. How would you handle this now if you don't, like, if you do agree that, like, yes, I have been doing this, I'm a workaholic, like, this is very clear, I work 60 hours a week. But what if she or someone is saying something to you that just isn't true? Are you still going to go through this process?
Well, the point is, in talking to crazy, what you have to realize is that what they're saying is true for them. So it may be non-rational, but it's true for them. And so the point is, what I would say is try plan A, which was what I just went through. If you're listening to this and you found it valuable, just, zip back and listen to this whole thing, because it is seamless. And often what will happen is, like begets like. In my book, Just Listen, I talked about something called mirror neurons, in which, defensiveness begets defensiveness. Forgiveness begets forgiveness. Humility, which is what you're showing, humility, taking responsibility, and a commitment to change, unless you're dealing with a really unforgiving person. And they may be so discombobulated that, instead of being loving, they may hammer at you and say, well, good, or I'll believe it when I see it, or it's too little too late. You may be dealing with someone who in certain conversations have to have the last word. And if they do something like that, which makes you wish you hadn't even gone through the effort, that's when you really man up and say, well, I would have liked a different immediate response, but the offer is still there and I'm still committed to this. And so in other words, you don't take the bait just because they can't let you be right. And there's a good chance that the next day they will come back to you and say, that was a terrible thing I said to you. That was an amazing conversation that you sprang on me, and I just wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't ready to hear it because, to be honest, I didn't even think you were capable of it. And that was a crappy thing I said at the end. But, you got to man up. But what I'm doing is I am giving you a template and a blueprint for just how a conversation like that can take place. Make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And earlier you brought up that, you can be this alpha male, this entrepreneur mindset, but you got to tap into that tenderness. And I think that right there is a tough thing to do for a lot of men is to tap into that vulnerability and really tap into their emotions and share with them what they're noticing, so to speak, and what they're feeling. I think that right there is a challenge for men.
Well, I got to share an anecdote with you. So if people are listening, I wrote a blog for Psychology Today, I believe, and it's called Don't Disappoint Max, an open letter to Mark Zuckerberg. Because Mark Zuckerberg just had a daughter recently.
Okay.
And so I have 3 grown children. My oldest, I have 2 daughters and a son. And so I wrote him a letter. And I said, Dear Mark, I can't remember completely, but I said, congratulations on having, your daughter, Max. In the next, weeks to months, if you're like a lot of dads, if you're like me, you're going to look into the eyes of your daughter, and she's going to look into your eyes, and it's going to be like looking into the eyes of God, because you're going to experience trust from her and joy from her and you towards her that is beyond anything you've ever experienced in life. That's why it's like looking into the eyes of God. And if you keep looking into her eyes, what you might see is what I saw when my oldest daughter was 3 months old. And what she was saying is, when I'm 18, make me proud. And Mark, when she's 18 and she wants to be proud of you, and if she says, what did you do to make the world better, Dad? What she'll say is, well, I co-founded something called Facebook. I connected more people in the world. And when you were born, I gave away 99% of it to help make the world a better place. And if you say that to her, there's a missing link, Mark. And the missing link is if you help the world connect, but you do nothing to help them relate to each other, you've left something out. And I'm assuming that having had 3 miscarriages with your wife, that you've had tender conversations. I'm assuming, that you were capable of an intimate conversation. Now, I might be wrong, but I got to believe it was painful because you actually posted how painful it was. And so here's my proposal to you. I think you should teach, train, or get training for every employee of Facebook, every one of them, to be able to have tender and intimate conversations with their families, like you've learned. And by the way, you do that, the gratitude they will feel towards you and Facebook for changing their life will go through the roof. And they will repay you in productivity. But if you are only able to say to your daughter when she's 18, well, I connected the world, and look what's happening to the world that's connected. Terrorists are using everything to scare the heck out of everyone.
Right. Yeah, they're social media experts.
That's right. And so, but I thank you for tolerating the long-winded story. But I think the point goes to what you were saying. There's a lot of guys who don't get this tenderness type thing, and I guess you might want to think about that, because and I belong to a group of entrepreneurs. I love this group, and they're all alpha males, and they're all doers, and 80% of them have been divorced. And they kind of chuckle about it like, oh, yeah, I've been divorced 3 times.
It's like a rite of passage or something.
Yeah, in fact, someone I know, and he has a podcast, and he says, well, I've been divorced 5 times because I think it's a bunch of BS that you have to work on your relationship. If your relationship needs work, end it. Life's too short. End it and find something, that makes you happy.
I think I know who that is. Okay.
No, I love the guy.
Yeah.
And, but, you might want to think about it. Also, it's interesting, in Just Listen, people often talk about the first chapter in Just Listen and Talking to Crazy as being really good ways of hooking and grabbing the reader. So in Just Listen, in the first chapter, probably an alpha male CEO calls me and he's emotional, or he leaves me a message, Dr. Goulston, please call me as soon as you can. And I thought, oh my God, what's wrong? And he called me and he was choked up. And he said, I think you may have saved my life. And I said, well, what do you mean? Was it with your business or what's happening? And he said, no, it wasn't with my business. It's with my son. Because I was telling you that I thought my son was soft and he uses this ADD as an excuse and he needs to focus. And it's, and he's not focusing and he's really bright. And if he just focused, he could get stuff done. And it's like his junior year and, and he's going to blow it all. And what you told me, Dr. Mark, is that my son, who doesn't do drugs and he's a good kid, that he was in all kinds of pain and he was like alone in hell. And I was making it worse on him. And so I tried with my son what you suggested. I said, well, what was that? And there's something that I call the magical paradox. And that's when you say something like this. He said to his son, I'm trying to remember, he said, I'll bet you sometimes feel that neither your mom or me, or especially me, knows what it's like to be told that you're smart or bright and not be able to use it. Isn't that true? And I said, so what'd your son say? And my son, he said, got a little emotional. He said, yeah, it's true. But, I got through to him. And I said, what'd you say next? And he said, I used a similar form, and I'll bet you sometimes feel that it's getting worse in your junior year because everything counts, and you can't make it go away. And then his son agreed to that, getting emotional. And what happened is he loved his son. He realized what he'd done to him, and then he said to his son, I want to apologize because I think I made it worse on you. I think I broke you. And I want to apologize for that because I didn't know how bad you felt and I didn't want to know. And the son looked at him right in the eye and he said, I want to apologize for some of the things I did to deal with that, which you must never tell Mom. And these were chilling things. And so, he got emotional on the phone. And I said, so what are you doing now? And he said, he was crying. He said, it's my boy. It's my little boy. I can't let him be that way. So I told him, that I'd like to just hang out with him when he's trying to do homework. And I bring my laptop and I don't ask questions. And I said, let me just sit on your bed and I'll do my stuff. But I just don't want you to be alone while you're hitting your head against the wall and then getting distracted. And he said, I think we're turning a corner. So do you think that would get through to any of your alpha audience?
Yeah. What would you say is the key takeaway from that experience?
Well, I think what happened is it goes back to my original statement, be a first-class noticer.
Yeah.
It's that as I pointed out to him, well, if your kid's not really doing anything, crazy, getting drunk and drugs and all those things, and he's a good kid, then he's in incredible pain. Especially since if he's not doing those things, he doesn't have an outlet. He doesn't have an outlet to let all this stuff out. And so it's just inside him. And I want you to notice that and then try this magical paradox, which is, I'll bet you sometimes feel such and such. And I used to do that in FBI and hostage negotiation training, is that depending on who you're talking to, when you say to someone, and I talk about an event like this in the book, that's also in the first chapter of there was a hostage negotiation situation that's in the first chapter of Just Listen, and I think what the people who I trained said to this person when they found out that this was an evil person, it was just the last straw. I think he got a restraining order or something from his ex-wife. And I think what they said to this person, it was all said to blow his brains out in a big parking lot. They said, "I'll bet you sometimes feel that nobody knows what it's like to sort of try everything in life and be left with this as your only option. Isn't that true?" And so it's a paradox because you're actually saying what the other person's thinking. And so what in this particular incident, what that person who wasn't holding anyone hostage, he was just holding the parking lot hostage because he was there in his car with a gun to his neck. And he said, "Yeah, nobody knows and nobody gives a flying F." But what happened is you're then in the conversation with him, because you're actually showing that you do know by saying what you said, and he's starting to vent.
Right.
And then the second thing he said is, "And I'll bet you sometimes feel that nobody knows what it's like to start every day and know that something's going to backfire, and by the end of the day, it's going to be much worse. Isn't that true?" Because as he got data coming in, that's what his life had turned into. And so with a series of these kinds of questions, this particular individual is able to say, "Yeah, you're right. Nobody knows," and blah 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 blah. But can you see in your mind's eye that you're engaging him and drawing him into the conversation, getting relief from the conversation and drawing him away from the trigger?
Yeah. That's got to be a very tense situation, but I like the approach that you have, and I think a lot of guys are taking big notes on what you're saying here from the previous example, and then the one that you just gave us now. This is really like, instead of fighting fire with fire, you're almost like acknowledging the person for what they're experiencing and getting into their world, and it seems like you're getting really close to them. I guess using the word, you're noticing what they're going through, and that creates a sense of a connection, or kind of, if it's like a gauge, it kind of like reduces the tension that's there, and a conversation can then begin.
You just hit the nail on the head. And so for those skeptics, I've won you over. You were an easy lay, Andrew. What can I tell you? But But for the skeptics listening, to build my case, because you say about the tension, when you lean into someone and you enable them to open up, what happens in your brain is your cortisol goes down, and when your cortisol is up, you're stressed out, and your oxytocin goes up. Cortisol goes down, which is the stress-related hormone, and oxytocin, which men have also, goes up. And oxytocin's related to bonding. Oxytocin used to be called the love drug, and there's actually something called Pitocin that they give pregnant women during labor. And some people say, there's pluses and minuses, but they've actually given this oxytocin or Pitocin to people, and it's actually helped some autistic people become more social. So when you're listening to someone, listening into and leaning into someone, and validating what they're saying, not agreeing with them, but validating, how they're so upset, that switches. And so that's one of the reasons the tension goes away.
Could you recap what the difference is between validating and agreeing what they're saying?
Well, validating means being able to see how they would see it that way.
Okay.
So, if we go back to either the example of you're dealing with your spouse or your girlfriend, given the fact that when you were once alpha mailing, pursuing her, wooing her because she was a prize, and then you drop that, to focus on building your business, and you popped out a couple kids, but you and then blew her off after she felt you adored her because you were pursuing her. You can see how that's really hurt her over time, and then angered her over time, and then turned her cold over time. Right?
Yeah. So that's the validating.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you may not agree with some of the actual things she says, but again, I'm telling you, if you read Just Listen and Talking to Crazy, and you get to go inside people from their inside out, it'll change your life. Can I share one other anecdote that's better than the other two?
If it's better than the other two, and keep it short.
Okay, well, maybe a couple minutes. I'm sorry, but
Go ahead.
Okay, where I actually learned this is I was a suicide specialist. I used to see people who were discharged from UCLA Hospital who were still suicidal, but they weren't acutely suicidal. So a mentor of mine would do a consultation. The residents didn't want to see them, and he'd refer them out to a fool out in the community who was willing to see people who were suicidal, and that fool was me. And so I used to moonlight at a state hospital to make some extra bucks. And sometimes I'd be up 36 hours, and I was seeing this one woman who'd made 3 attempts and been in the hospital several times in the years prior to seeing me. And she never made eye contact. She hardly spoke. And there it was, a Monday morning, and I was sleep deprived. And I'm sitting with her. And as I'm sitting with her, all the color in the room turns to black and white. And then it starts to get cold. And I thought I was having a seizure or stroke. So I'm an MD, medical doctor. I did a neurologic exam on myself. I'm tapping my knees. I'm looking at my fingers. And I realized, no, I'm all here. And then I thought, I think I'm seeing the world through her eyes emotionally. I don't know how it happened, but a black and white, chilling, awful thing, I think that's what she feels and sees. So I leaned into it, and it was awful. And this is what I said to her because I was sleep deprived. Normally I wouldn't say it. And I said, Nancy, I didn't know it was so bad, and I can't help you kill yourself. But if you do, I will still think well of you, and I will miss you. And maybe I'll understand why you had to get out of all that pain. And then I thought to myself, did I think that or did I say that? And I thought, God, I said it. I just gave her permission. And that was the first time she looked at me. I'd been seeing her 6 months, and I didn't think I was helping her at all, except she hadn't tried a suicide attempt. And she looked at me, and I thought she was going to say, hey, thanks for understanding. I'm overdue. I'm overdue for my next attempt. And I said, what are you thinking? And she looked right into my eyes, and I realized I'd gotten it right. And she said, if you can really understand why I might have to kill myself to get out of this pain. She then smiled, and she said, maybe I won't need to.
Wow.
And so, do you follow me? So I connected with her from the inside out.
Yeah.
And that's my vantage point in the world.
Yeah, this is very powerful for different channels, like relationships, in your work and in counseling, negotiation, but even in business and sales, just like across the spectrum, just relating to people and getting into their world. I think that's what people are trying to do when they're communicating. Just, do you understand my world? And I think we're too busy trying to think about what to say next that we skip that part.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe we'll do another interview if people want to ramp up how to apply all this, Dr. Mark's craziness to sales. I wrote an article on how to close more. The secret to closing more sales is to never answer a question in a first conversation. Now, this is if you're selling a service like consulting or something. It's not necessarily a product. And the reason for that is what you want to do is you want to open people up more and more and more than they would to your competitors. And when you open them up more and more and more, they really feel that you get them and you understand them completely. And so even if they ask you a question, what do you think? And if they say, what do you think? Because they've opened up so much, they don't even care what you think. They just feel uncomfortable because they've told you more than they normally tell anyone. And at that point, cut to the chase because we're just about out of time, is what you say to them, even then, is you can say, I can, and by the way, how you want to lead up to that conversation is you get them to talk about what's critical and urgent. And so you open them up and they get stuff off their chest. Then you help them prioritize in what's critical and urgent. And then at that point, they're going to say, what do you think? What do you think? Even if you have an answer, you say, you've just told me stuff that's critical and urgent to you. And I could give you a B plus answer, but it wouldn't be my best answer because you just shared some stuff and I want to check some things. So the question is, how urgent is it? And do you want me to go through the steps to get you my A plus answer after I check some things? Because I don't want to cheat you out of my best answer. Because what your goal is to get them to then schedule the next meeting. But can you see if it ends that way?
Yeah.
They've opened up. They'll say, yeah. We could say, well, how urgent it is, and and when do you need my best answer? So your goal, especially if you're selling consulting services, is to have a first conversation lead to a second one that they initiate.
Yeah. Okay. Really good. I think that's a whole nother podcast interview. I'd be excited to schedule that one sometime in the future. Mark, do you have a little bit of time for the knowledge round?
Sure.
Guys, after 200 plus interviews, traveling the world, attending dozens of personal growth events, I finally cracked the code on how to unleash the man within. This Wednesday, I'll be sharing my biggest insights on creating the life you want, and I'm doing an open QA with all of you. I'm doing this live event because it gives me a place to connect with the Knowledge for Men community directly versus listening to me. Now you get to interact with me. Register for the next event by going to kfmlive.com. Last week's event was a massive success, so don't miss out. There's limited space available. Again, register for the next event by going to kfmlive.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. Here, and so the first question I have here is just noticing your career. When I was reading through your bio, seems like you just have a strong sense of purpose about what you want to accomplish and what you're doing in the world. So what advice would you give to someone who is feeling lost and unsure of their thing, their purpose?
Well, I did an exercise with myself that I do with people that I coach who are looking for this. Imagine your personality is a circle, and inside that circle is the parts of your personality that are trying to prove something, show something, hide something, or please someone. Prove, show, hide, please. And if you eliminate all of those things from your personality, what's left? And a lot of people pause and they say, nothing. And I say, well, if all of you is about proving, showing, hiding, or pleasing, then the rest of the world owns you. You don't own you. So try to eliminate that, because doing all those things is too forced, and a calling may reveal itself to you. And that's what happened to me, is that I eliminated those things, and a calling that has been there for 40 years revealed itself to me. And I co-founded a site, which is too soft for the alpha listeners, but I founded a site called Heartfelt Leadership. And if you go to heartfeltleadership.com, our mission is finding leaders that dare to care. And we have wonderful videos of top leaders and how did they learn how to care, and what does that mean to them? So, we'd like it to be, we would like to help identify and develop those kind of leaders, and boy, is there a shortage of them.
Yeah. No, I think it's very much aligned with what we're doing here. Yeah, that works. What would you say are two or three maybe of your most influential books that have helped you on your journey, and why?
One of them is a book called Power Questions by Andrew Sobel. And it's a wonderful book, and it's the power of questions. It's not really your answers that have impact. It's the questions you ask and what it draws out of people. And I think he has a subsequent book, which is not quite as popular, but is very good, called Power Relationships. But I would recommend that to everyone. Probably one of the other books that I'm very keen on is a book called Judgment: How Great Leaders Make Great Judgment Calls by Noel Tichy, Tichy, and Warren Bennis, my late mentor. And it really digs into that the best leaders make the best judgment calls. And meaning that, when they're put under pressure, and we certainly need that from our leaders, that they have good judgment, and when they're called upon to make good judgment calls, they make more of those than bad judgment calls. And so that book also appeals to me.
All right. I haven't heard of those books. I'll be checking those out on Amazon. And next one's really more of a scenario, Mark. Imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. What would you tell 20-year-old Mark to do, and what would you tell him not to do?
This is very personal. I'd say cut yourself some slack. Don't be so hard on yourself. Because I think what's happened is I have Schindler moments every day, meaning I always think I can do more. The tragedy and the pain of the world gets to me. One of my last conversations with my late mentor, Warren Bennis, who some will say discovered the field of leadership, he said to me, we had a long lunch, and he said, some will say I invented the field of leadership, and leaders are worse than ever. Maybe I did a lousy job. And the pain of someone like him, who I love deeply and I miss him every day, was huge. That's what spawned me to create Heartfelt Leadership. And I actually sent him an email, and I said, you have more control over trying and quitting than the results. And my life is much better because you're in it, and the world is much better because you're in it, and you can't do this to yourself.
That's very powerful. How has that right there impacted you today?
Well, I think leadership is something the world needs to save it, but the world doesn't want it. I think we've made very little progress in leadership, and we've gone backwards. That scares me. And I think the reason, and I'll throw this out at your audience, to your alpha guys, and I've become a little bit alpha myself, is the pressure to get short-term results, the pressure to get more sooner. And here's the irony. Talk about fulfillment. Most people who are driven to get more sooner know it won't make them happier. It'll give them temporary fun. And the main reason they are addicted to more sooner, knowing that it won't make them happier in the long run, is they believe it's a sure thing that getting less later will make them miserable.
Yeah. We do live in such an instant gratification society. I mean, if you turn on your computer and your internet doesn't work right away, it's like the end of the world. if Wi-Fi isn't working right, it's the end of the world. We need things quick. We want things now. And, I think it's just not how, life works.
Someone asked me, I recently met some of the CEOs who've done startups in Israel, and Israel's percentage of successful startups is huge. It may be close to 80%. I may get that wrong. But in America, it's 10%. And so someone said, what do you think the difference is with Israel and America? Well, part of it, everybody in Israel served in the military. So the military is great training for decisions and what's important and what's not important. But one of the things I mentioned to them, which goes to what you just said, is American entrepreneurs engage in what I call gratuitous disruption, meaning it can be frivolous. Whereas Israel's trying to survive. When they come up with disruptive innovation, it's important. But what happens is, because of the more sooner wanting excitement mindset of America, we just create all this stuff. We don't even care about the value as long as it's exciting. Now, we may be seeing a sea change, because what's happened to America and the rest of the world is probably looking at us not as alarmed as we are with the increasing terrorism, because the rest of the world is thinking, well, it's about time you join the rest of us. One of the reasons you were able to have all this innovation is because you had two oceans and, in Mexico and Canada. Basically the body of your country was safe, except for 9/11 and now these things. Welcome to our world. See how it changes yours. And maybe that'll help us be a little bit more thoughtful, and that when we innovate, that the innovations, need to serve a purpose and have value, as opposed to, oh, isn't this neat? Isn't this fun? But we'll see.
Yeah, I think that that type of mindset, I didn't think about that. That really says a lot about Israel and kind of the state that they've been in for half a century now. I've just got to ask you, Mark, here, what would you say is your philosophy on life and success? So much life experience, just not because of age, but because of how much you've done, how much you've actually lived, and how much you've, put out into the world, and your network of people and the people that you've worked with. Like, what has been today your philosophy on life and success?
Well, I'm in the third stage of my life. And thank you, by the way, for letting me go on these tangents. But the three stages of success, of life, is, I think, when you're in your 20s into your early mid-30s, you do what you should do, because you have to develop street cred. You need credibility. You can't be a rebel without a cause unless you're a genius, and there's very few of them. So doing what you should do is the first part of your life. After that, from probably 35 to 50-ish, 35, 55, is doing what you could do. So that's where you find out what your strengths are, your skills, your talents, and you put them together to fulfill your potential. That's what you could do. I'm in my 60s, so I'm in the last stage of my life, is doing what I was born to do and meant to do. And what I was born to do and meant to do, and here's my personal mission. I've even trademarked it. Anyone listening to this wants to help, I would welcome it. My personal mission is healing the world one conversation at a time, because I know how to facilitate people listening into, leaning into, and talking with each other. And the mission is, if you could talk with one person a day, and that's different than talking over, at, or even to them. If you could have a conversation where you talk with people once a day, it would change the world. And in fact, something that I heard at a church group, and the holiday season is on us, but I think this is great homework. I thought it was a brilliant assignment, and this church gives homework assignments. And what the person said, and this is an example of healing the world one conversation at a time, he assigned for everyone in attendance to go out and buy 100 blank thank you cards. Nice thank you cards, but don't break the bank. Don't break the bank buying them. And what you do is you say thank you on the envelope, and inside you say, thank you for what you do for the world. You don't sign your name, that's all you say. And then you go out and you give them to people like bus drivers. You give them to police officers. You give them to people who are often in thankless jobs. And you don't wait around to get credit. You're like Santa. Instead of dropping a toy down the chimney, you just do that. And it's kind of an acknowledgement. And to me, it's not a conversation, but you follow where that leads?
Yeah, I do. I think that's very coming from a place of true power, where you can just give to give, not to give to receive.
Absolutely.
So maybe this is my American, we're talking about the instant gratification, but do you think you can skip some of those life stages and instead of doing what you have to do, just go straight into doing what you were born to do?
I think the majority of the people can't. Now, there are some people, they may be wealthy people who are dedicated to service and who are appreciative of what they have been given. What is the saying? To those who are given much, much is expected. Something like that. Or noblesse oblige. And so there are some people who don't take lightly what they've been given, and partially that's because they have such deep compassion for the pain and hurt in the world. So I think those people can skip the steps. But the majority of people, I think you do have to sort of earn that street cred early on by being someone who does what he or she says you're going to do. You need to have integrity, and you need to be accountable. Oh, here's another kind of tip. Never use the word roles and responsibilities again, because it's too vague. So if you're interviewing for a job and you want to get the interviewer's attention, and they say, well, what were your roles and responsibilities for your last job? You look them straight in the eye and you say, oh, you mean what was I accountable for? It is such a crisp answer. And the interviewer is going to go, oh, yeah, what were you accountable for? Because when you talk about what you were accountable for, that has outcomes attached to it. Problem I have with words like roles and responsibilities, it goes all over the map and it's too vague. So, but getting back to those 3 stages, what you should do is what you step up and say, this is what I'm accountable for. And stepping up to that. Yeah,
really good. I want to touch on that. And that's going to conclude the knowledge round there. And guys, for all the guys listening, Dr. Mark Goulston's got, a plethora, a lot of books here on Amazon. You just go to Amazon, type in his name. Talking to Crazy is the one where we were diving into that one and Just Listen in this episode here. But he also has many other books such as Get Out of Your Own Way, Real Influence, and 6 Secrets of a Lasting Relationship, and many more. So go to Amazon, check out Mark Goulston, and you can also go to goulstongroup.com to follow up with him and his products, services, and coaching and management consulting. But Mark,
there's a link there. If you go to goulstongroup.com, GOULSTON group.com, and click on the tab Free Stuff, I give away all kinds of stuff. So even included there are the slides I did a presentation at Harvard Business School recently on listening, because the head of Harvard Business School said, I think our MBAs need to listen more. They talk too much. So all the slides from my presentation are there if you click on Free Stuff. Great.
And just what's, exciting you in 2016, Mark, as we touch off here?
I think what's exciting is my platform seems to be rising. I mean, I'm not a rock star because I hope I come off as more passionate than self-promotional. But because I'm not self-promotional, it's word of mouth that people find out about me. Just Listen became the top book on listening in the world. No book tour, no advertising, 16 languages, 100,000 copies. My book, Get Out of Your Own Way, if you look up self-help books on Amazon, it's 20 years old. It's been in the top 5 for 10 years. But I'm guessing, people don't know about my work. And so it seems like a rising tide. I'm doing interviews 3 or 4 times a week. And Also, I think I can do something. I've been speaking on how do you lead through terror? How do you lead through fear? And I think we've gone over certain approaches by the listening into and leaning into as a way to do that with the people around you who are afraid. And so, I'd like some of my Schindler's guilt to be less by the end of 2016, because as I said, every day the world kind of cries out to me and I feel like I haven't done enough. And so, maybe we'll check in a year from now and we'll just check in, because I'm getting off this call to go deal with stuff that the world is calling out to me to do. And that gives me purpose. That's what I was meant to do.
Yeah. Yeah, your work matters, and it's sometimes you just don't hear from all the people. They don't, sometimes they don't just write you and tell you what you've done, but it's hard to, really get clear on how big of an impact you've made. But I'm just looking at your work here and the stuff you're doing, and even just your bio, and looking at all your books on Amazon and all the reviews here, and you have done tremendous value and tremendous work that, you impact 100,000 people, and they go on and each impact one person and 2 people and 3 people, and it just magnifies. So it's, I think it's sometimes hard to classify in this type of business, like the level of impact you've made. So I can tell and know that you have.
Well, it's not about fame. Like Warren said, he was about leadership, and leaders seem to be worse than ever. And my whole career has been about alleviating fear and pain. And there's more fear and pain in the world. I mean, much more. It's leaning towards terror. And again, I'm just a single little guy, and I shouldn't put that on me. But to be devoted to lessening fear and pain and anger, and just see there be more of it every day. I feel a little bit like Warren did. What can I tell you?
You're doing great things. And I'm looking forward to having you back on the show in the future to touching on maybe a new book or even just a new exciting topic that you've been diving into. But Mark, this has been an incredible interview, and I'm happy to put it out. Thousands of guys will listen to it.
I feel honored that you reached out to me. And one thing that keeps me young, by the way, is I probably mentor about 25 people around the world. So maybe we'll talk offline, my friend.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and 1 million downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we've just started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a review in iTunes. It really helps to grow the podcast. Guys, 2015 is the official year of living with purpose, where every day you do only the things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. Check out kfmfree.com to get free tools I've created to help you crush life. Again, that's kfmfree.com. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, and I'll see you in the next episode.